To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Ghosts in the Rearview. Curtis Farley checked his watch, 6:47 a.m., then adjusted the rearview mirror of the black Mercedes S-Class. Through the windshield, the Morris estate sprawled before him like a small kingdom, all manicured lawns and fountains that cost more than most people's houses. 3 years he'd been driving for the Morris family. 3 years since he'd walked away from the only life he'd ever known. His phone buzzed. A text from Walter Morris, taking Joel to school today. 7:30 sharp. Curtis typed back a quick confirmation and pocketed the phone. 12-year-old Joel Morris, bright kid, curious, always asking Curtis about his time in the service. The boy had no idea what those questions cost him, how each one pulled Curtis back to Kandahar province, to a compound that should have been empty, to the screams of his team as everything went to hell. Eric Vance's voice still haunted his dreams. His spotter, his best friend, bleeding out in that Afghan dirt while Curtis held pressure on wounds that wouldn't stop pumping blood. "You tried, brother," Eric had whispered. "Not your fault." But Curtis knew better. He'd been team leader. He'd made the call to breach. He'd gotten 6 good men killed because he trusted bad intel. The front door opened, and Joel bounded out, backpack bouncing, his mop of brown hair catching the morning sun. Behind him, Catherine Morris followed, elegant even in casual clothes, worry creasing her refined features. "Morning, Curtis," Joel called out, already moving toward the car. "Hold up, speed racer." Curtis stepped out, opening the rear door. "How's the science project coming?" "Finished it last night. It's about trajectory and velocity." Joel paused, his eyes lighting up. "Hey, you probably know all about that stuff, right? From being a sniper." Curtis felt Catherine's gaze on him, protective and apologetic at once. "Some," he said quietly. "Let's focus on getting you to school on time." Walter Morris emerged last, phone pressed to his ear, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. At 53, he'd built Morris Tech from a garage startup to a Fortune 500 company, but the success had carved lines into his face that made him look older. He nodded at Curtis while finishing his call, something about quarterly projections and board meetings. Inside the car, Joel immediately started chattering about an upcoming field trip. Curtis listened with half an ear, scanning the road ahead out of habit, checking angles, marking exits, identifying potential threats. Some instincts never died. "You ever miss it?" Joel asked suddenly. "Being a SEAL?" Curtis's hands tightened on the wheel. "Every day." "Then why'd you stop?" "Joel, that's enough," Catherine said gently from the front passenger seat where she'd settled. "It's okay, Mrs. Morris." Curtis met Joel's eyes in the mirror. "I stopped because I learned that not every mission has a happy ending. Sometimes the best you can do is make sure the people you're protecting get home safe." He didn't mention that he'd failed at that once. That 6 families had buried empty caskets while he stood at attention. A broken man in dress blues, wondering why he'd been the only one to walk out of that compound alive. Woodland Preparatory Academy appeared ahead, its brick facades and iron gates projecting old money and privilege. Curtis pulled into the drop-off circle, and Joel gathered his things. "Thanks, Curtis. See you this afternoon." "Stay sharp, Joel." The boy grinned and disappeared into the crowd of students. Catherine watched him go with that particular intensity only a mother could manage, as if she could protect him through sheer force of will. "He admires you," she said as Curtis pulled away from the school. "Walter does too, though he'd never say it. You've been good for this family." "Just doing my job, ma'am." "No." She turned to face him fully. "You do much more than drive us around, Curtis, and we both know it. When that man tried to break into the house last year, I happened to be there. You happened to disarm him in under 3 seconds and held him until police arrived without causing any injury. Walter told me you could have killed him a dozen different ways." She paused. "We trust you with our son, with our lives. That's not something we take lightly." Curtis said nothing, navigating back toward the estate. Trust. It was a fragile thing, and he'd learned the hard way how quickly it could shatter. Back at the Morris house, he parked the Mercedes in the garage next to Walter's Bentley and Catherine's Range Rover. The mansion was quiet now, just Curtis and the housekeeper, Lorena Maldonado, who'd worked for the family for 5 years. She was in the kitchen when he entered, wiping down counters with methodical precision. "Morning, Lorena." "Buenos dias, Curtis." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She'd seemed distracted lately, nervous. Curtis had noticed, but hadn't pressed. Everyone had their demons. His phone buzzed again. "Walter, need you to pick up Joel at 3 p.m. I have a board meeting running late." Curtis confirmed and headed to his quarters above the garage, a small apartment the Morris family had insisted he take instead of the servant's room. It was comfortable, sparse, decorated with exactly nothing personal except a single framed photo of his SEAL team. 7 men in tactical gear, arms around each other, grinning despite the heat and danger. 6 of them were dead now. He should have thrown the photo away, should have moved on, but that would mean forgetting them, and Curtis Farley didn't forget his debts. Chapter 2. Everything Breaks. The call came at 3:47 p.m. Curtis had been early to Woodland Prep, parked in his usual spot under an oak tree with a clear view of the main entrance. At 3:30, the doors had burst open and students poured out like a dam breaking. He'd watched for Joel's familiar backpack, his easy gait, but the crowd thinned and the boy never appeared. By 3:40, Curtis was inside, showing his driver's credentials to the front desk. The secretary checked her computer, frowned, and checked again. Joel Morris was marked absent from his last 2 periods. "I'm showing that he left with O." Her frown deepened. His uncle signed him out at 1:15 p.m. for a dental appointment. Joel doesn't have an uncle. Curtis's voice came out flat, dead calm, the way it had sounded on missions when everything was going sideways. "Call the Morris family. Now." The secretary's face went pale. She grabbed the phone. Curtis was already moving, pulling out his own phone, dialing Walter while his mind raced through protocols and possibilities. Kidnapping. Professional or amateur? Random or targeted? How much head start did they have? 2.5 hours. That was a lifetime. Walter answered on the first ring. "Curtis?" "Did Joel?" "Joel's gone. Someone impersonating a family member signed him out at 1:15. I need you to..." "What?" The word came out strangled. "What do you mean gone?" "Curtis, where's my son?" "I'm handling it. Listen to me carefully, Walter. Call the police right now. Detective Hugo Rivas. He's good. Tell him I sent you. Then go home. Don't touch anything in Joel's room. Don't call anyone else. And for God's sake, don't panic. Do you understand? My son. I will find him. I promise you. But I need you to follow my instructions exactly." Curtis hung up and turned to the secretary, who was wide-eyed and trembling. "Security footage. I need to see who signed him out." Now, 10 minutes later, Curtis was watching grainy video of a man in an expensive suit, mid-40s confident stride, signing the release forms with practiced ease. Dark hair, aviator sunglasses, a scar on his left hand. The man never looked at the camera, kept his head angled away. Professional. Joel had walked out with him without resistance, chatting easily. The boy had trusted whoever this was. Curtis took photos of the footage with his phone, sent them to a contact he hadn't called in 3 years. Marcus Webb, retired CIA, now running a private intelligence firm. The text was simple. Need ID. Urgent. The response came in 60 seconds. "Curtis? Thought you went dark. Later. Need this now. On it." Curtis drove back to the Morris estate, pushing 90 on surface streets, his mind running through scenarios and discarding them. Random kidnapping? Unlikely. This was too smooth, too planned. Ransom? Probably, given a Morris family fortune. But something felt wrong about the whole setup, something he couldn't name yet. The Morris estate was already crawling with police when Curtis arrived. Detective Hugo Rivas stood on the front steps, a barrel-chested man in his 50s with a reputation for getting results. He nodded at Curtis. "Mr. Morris said you be coming. Says you're former SEAL. Team 6, Sniper Division. Then you know this is a police matter now. We appreciate your concern, but I'm not backing off." Curtis met his gaze steadily. "That boy is under my protection. I failed people before, detective. I won't fail again." Something in Curtis's tone made Rivas pause. He studied Curtis for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but you operate through me. No cowboy bullshit. We do this by the book. Agreed. Inside, the mansion felt like a tomb. Catherine sat on a white leather couch, her face a mask of barely controlled terror, while Walter paced nearby, phone in hand, looking like he'd aged 10 years in an hour. When Catherine saw Curtis, she stood. Tell me you'll find him. Please, Curtis. Tell me. I will. He knelt beside her, his voice low and certain. I give you my word. The house phone rang. Everyone froze. Rivas moved quickly, signaling his tech team to trace the call, then nodded at Walter. Answer it. Keep them talking. Walter's hand shook as he picked up the receiver. Hello. A voice came through, distorted by a scrambler, cold and emotionless. Walter Morris. You have something I want. Where's my son? If you've heard him, he's alive. For now. Whether he stays that way depends on you. $5 million, small bills, unmarked. You have 48 hours. I'll pay anything. Please, just don't. You'll receive instructions tomorrow. One wrong move, one call to the authorities, and we both know you've already made that mistake. And we start sending him back in pieces, starting with his fingers. Catherine's sob was audible across the room. Wait, Walter's voice cracked. How do I know he's alive? I need proof. A pause, then muffled sounds. Then Joel's voice, thin and terrified. Dad? Dad, I'm scared. They said. The line went dead. Catherine collapsed back onto the couch, her hands over her mouth. Walter stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear like he could will his son's voice back. Rivas was already on his radio, coordinating with his tech team. Curtis stood perfectly still, his mind filing away every detail. The voice had been disguised, but there had been background noise, traffic, maybe, or machinery. Joel had sounded scared but uninjured. The 48-hour window was standard, enough time to arrange payment, but not enough to mount a proper investigation. The threat about sending him back in pieces was designed to terrorize, to ensure compliance. These weren't amateurs, but they'd made one critical mistake. They thought Curtis Farley was just a chauffeur. His phone buzzed. Marcus Webb, got your ID. Glenn Madden, ex-cop, turned private security, went independent 5 years ago. Word is he does wet work for the right price. Sending full file. Curtis read through the file quickly. Glenn Madden, 43, divorced, no kids. Dishonorable discharge from Detroit PD for excessive force. Known associates included his younger brother Melvin Madden, and both had connections to organized crime. Last known address was a rental property in the industrial district. But something else caught Curtis's attention. 5 years ago, the same time Lorena Maldonado had started working for the Morris family, Curtis found her in the kitchen, pretending to organize already organized cabinets. Her hands were shaking. Lorena. She turned, and guilt was written across her face in bold letters. He said no one would get hurt, she whispered. Glenn said they just wanted money, that the boy would be safe. He promised me. Where is he? Curtis's voice was soft, but something in it made Lorena step back. I don't know, I swear. He never told me. Curtis, please, I needed the money. My sister in Guadalajara, she's sick, the hospital bills. How does he contact you? Burner phone. He calls me. She pulled it from her pocket with trembling hands. Curtis took it, checking the call log. One number, called 6 times in the past week. Does anyone else know? Police. No. Please don't. I won't. But you're going to do exactly what I tell you. When Glenn calls next, you act normal. Tell him everything's going according to plan. Can you do that? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. I never thought. People never do. Curtis pocketed the phone. Stay in your room. Don't talk to anyone. He found Rivas in the study, organizing his team. The detective looked up. Got something? Maybe. I need to check some things. Can your tech people trace a burner phone if someone calls it? If they call long enough. What? I might have a lead. I'll keep you updated. Curtis left before Rivas could ask more questions. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the Morris estate in shades of orange and red. Somewhere out there, Joel was scared, alone, probably wondering why no one had come for him yet. Curtis climbed into his personal vehicle, a beat-up Ford truck he'd bought with cash, and pulled out his own burner phone. He had calls to make, old contacts to leverage, and a plan forming in his mind that was absolutely not by the book. Detective Rivas was a good cop, but good cops followed rules, worked within systems, and Curtis had learned the hard way that sometimes the system failed. Not this time. Not again. Chapter 3. The Wire. Curtis sat in his apartment, surrounded by equipment he'd kept from his SEAL days. Laptop, scanning equipment, 3 different phones, and a lock case under his bed that held items that were decidedly illegal for a civilian to possess. He'd sworn he'd never touch them again. That promise lasted about as long as it took for Joel's terrified voice to replay in his head. His laptop screen showed everything Marcus had sent about Glenn Madden. The man was careful, professional, and had gotten away with at least 4 suspected kidnappings in the past 3 years. The key word was suspected. No proof, no convictions, no mistakes. Glenn knew how to operate in the shadows. But Curtis had spent most of his adult life in those same shadows, and he knew something Glenn didn't. The darkness could swallow you whole if you weren't careful. His phone buzzed. Marcus Webb. You planning something stupid? Define stupid. Anything without proper backup and a clear extraction plan. Curtis, if this is what I think it is, then you never heard from me. A long pause, then, stay alive, brother. Curtis shut off the phone and checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. The police would be monitoring the Morse family, expecting the kidnappers to call with instructions. They'd have protocols, negotiators, maybe even FBI involvement by morning. All good, all proper, all by the book. And by the time they finished following procedure, Joel Morris would be dead. Curtis had seen it before. Protocol failing, good intentions paving the road to tragedy. He'd lived it, breathed it, and buried his friends because of it. Not again. At midnight, he went downstairs. The main house was dark except for one window, the master bedroom, where Catherine and Walter were probably lying awake, staring at the ceiling. Curtis made his way to the study where Rivas had set up his command center. The detective was alone, reviewing footage, a cold cup of coffee beside him. Can't sleep either? Rivas asked without looking up. Got something you should know. The housekeeper, Lorena Maldonado. She's been in contact with one of the kidnappers. Rivas's head snapped up. What? Curtis explained, showing Lorena's burner phone and the call log. Rivas's expression darkened as he listened. This is evidence. We need to bring her in. No. Curtis's voice was firm. We use her. Glenn Madden thinks he has an inside source. We feed him information, control what he knows, use it to draw him out. That's not how we. Your way takes time. Time Joel doesn't have. Curtis leaned forward. Look, detective, I respect what you're trying to do, but I've been on the other side of hostage situations. I've seen what happens when things go wrong. These people have Joel, and every hour we waste following protocol is an hour they could decide he's too much trouble. Rivas studied him for a long moment. You lost someone. Your team, in Afghanistan. All of them. And you think this is your redemption? I think, Curtis said quietly, that I'm the only person in this house who knows what it takes to bring that boy home alive. I'm asking you to trust me, just for tonight. Something in Rivas's expression shifted. He was a cop, bound by rules, but he was also a man who'd seen too many cases end badly. Finally, he nodded. What's your play? When Glenn calls tomorrow with instructions, the family panics. They're desperate, terrified. And I, the loyal chauffeur, the former military man, I offer to help. I tell them I have contacts, people who can gather 5 million fast. But first, we need to show good faith. We wire money to prove we're serious. They're asking for 5 million. You're going to send $100. Rivas blinked. You're insane. I'm smart. Here's what Glenn doesn't know. Every wire transfer leaves a digital fingerprint. Banks have to report the routing information, the account details. We send $100, I can trace where it goes, backtrack to the bank, and from there, narrow down the area where they're operating. That's a huge risk. If Glenn gets spooked, he won't, because I'm going to sell it as a test. We send a small amount to verify the account works, to make sure we're not wiring 5 million into a dead end. It's logical, cautious. Glenn will see it as smart business. Rivas was quiet, then shook his head slowly. This is the craziest thing I've ever been part of. But you're in. I'm in. But Curtis, if this goes sideways, if that boy gets hurt because of this, then you put a bullet in me yourself. Deal. Deal. The morning came too slowly. Curtis sat with the Morris family at breakfast, none of them eating, all of them hollow-eyed and desperate. At 9:17 a.m., the house phone rang. Rivas was ready, his team monitoring. Walter answered on speaker. Hello. The same distorted voice. Ready to pay? Yes. Anything. Just please. Good. Here's what you do. Get the $5 million in cash. Hundreds and fifties, nothing sequential, nothing marked. At exactly 6 p.m. tomorrow, you'll receive a location. You come alone. Any police, any tricks, and the boy dies. Curtis leaned forward, catching Walter's attention. He mouthed, asked about the account. Walter's voice shook. The cash will take time to gather. Let me wire the money. No wires. Cash only. Then at least let me send something now. Prove I'm serious. A deposit. How do I know you'll keep your word? A pause. Glenn wasn't expecting this. Finally, what are you proposing? Curtis scribbled on a notepad, showed it to Walter. Let me wire $100,000 to your account. Right now, as proof that I can get the money, that I'm not stalling. Another pause, longer this time. Curtis could almost hear the wheels turning. Glenn would be weighing risks against rewards, wondering if it was a trap. But greed was a powerful motivator, and $100,000 was a lot to turn down. Fine. I'll send account information. You have 1 hour. The line went dead. 2 minutes later, an encrypted email arrived with bank routing numbers and an account number registered to a shell corporation in Panama. Curtis turned to Walter. Sir, I need to be straight with you about something. I've been thinking about this all night. $5 million in cash, that fast, it's going to be impossible through normal channels. But I have contacts, people from my old life who can help. Whatever you need. But first, we need to test this account. Make sure it's real, that we're not walking into an ambush. I say we send a smaller amount, $100. Verify it goes through, trace it, use it to confirm we're dealing with who we think we're dealing with. Catherine looked stricken. $100? That's insulting. What if they? Mrs. Morris, these people are professionals. They'll respect caution. But if I can trace where that money goes, I might be able to narrow down their location. It's a tactical advantage. Rivas stepped forward. He's right. We wire a test amount, see where it lands. If Glenn objects, we claim it was a bank error, send the full amount. But this gives us intel. Walter looked between them, then at his wife. Finally, he nodded. Do it. Curtis pulled out his laptop, accessing an account he'd kept dormant for years. $100 wasn't much. It had been meant for emergencies, for when he needed to disappear fast. Now it would serve a different purpose. He initiated the wire transfer, typing in the routing numbers. The screen confirmed, transfer pending. Estimated completion, 15 to 30 minutes. Now we wait, Curtis said. 32 minutes later, his tracking software pinged. The $100 had landed in the Panama account, then immediately split. Small amounts ricocheting through 3 different countries before landing in a domestic account at a regional bank in Henderson City, 30 miles from the Morris estate. Henderson City. Industrial sector, lots of abandoned warehouses, perfect place to hide a kidnapped child. Curtis's phone buzzed. The burner phone, Lorena's phone. A text from Glenn. What the hell was that? I said cash. Curtis showed it to Rivas, then typed back as Lorena. They're scared. Testing the account. They're gathering the money now. Full amount by tomorrow. The response came quickly. Better be. Any more games, and the kid loses a finger. Curtis pocketed the phone and turned to Walter. Sir, I need you to tell Glenn exactly what he wants to hear. You're gathering the money. You'll have it tomorrow. Everything's on track. Can you do that? Walter nodded, his jaw tight. Bring my son home, Curtis. That's the plan. Curtis stood, grabbing his jacket. Detective, I need to check something. I'll be back in a few hours. Like hell, Rivas said. I'm coming with you. They drove in Rivas's unmarked car. The detective behind the wheel, while Curtis navigated using a combination of GPS and memory. Henderson City wasn't large, but it was sprawling, old manufacturing plants, shipping depots, places that had thrived decades ago and now sat forgotten. You really think they're here? Rivas asked. The money trail says so. Glenn's smart, but he's also lazy. He wouldn't transfer funds too far from where he's operating. Too many variables. He's local. They spent 3 hours cruising through industrial zones, Curtis marking locations on a hand-drawn map. 12 potential sites, places with enough space and isolation to hold a hostage, close enough to the city for easy access. As the sun set, Curtis's phone buzzed again. Lorena's phone. Glenn calling. Curtis answered, pitching his voice to sound like Lorena's panic. Hello? Everything ready for tomorrow? See, they have the money. Police are watching, but they don't know nothing. Good. After tomorrow, you get your cut and disappear. Understood. Understood. Glenn hung up. Curtis looked at Rivas. We've got less than 24 hours. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., they expect Walter to show up with $5 million. So what's the play? Curtis stared out at the darkening cityscape, at the shadows where Glenn Madden was hiding with an innocent boy. We don't wait for tomorrow. Tonight we hunt. Chapter 4. The Hunter Becomes Prey. Curtis stood in the parking lot of an abandoned textile factory, the 4th location on his list. It was 2:34 a.m., the air cold enough that his breath misted, and somewhere inside that decaying structure, a 12-year-old boy might be scared and alone. Or might be empty, like the first 3 had been. Detective Rivas crouched beside him, thermal imaging scanner in hand. About heat signatures. 3, no, 4. Top floor, northeast corner. Distance from entry point, 200 feet, 3 floors up. Could be squatters. Could be our guys. Curtis pulled out his tactical knife, checking the edge. I'm going in. We should call for backup. By the time SWAT assembles, they'll hear the sirens and Joel's dead. I've done this 1,000 times, detective. Trust me. Rivas studied him for a long moment, then unholstered his service weapon and handed Curtis a spare radio. Channel 3. You get in trouble. I'm coming in hot. If I get in trouble, call for backup and stay clear. I won't risk another life. Curtis moved toward the factory, his body falling into familiar patterns. Every SEAL operation started the same way. Recon, assess, adapt. The building was 4 stories of broken windows and rusted fire escapes, its main entrance chained, but showing signs of recent disturbance. Someone had been here. He found a side door, its lock recently replaced. Too new, too clean. This was it. Inside, the factory was a maze of machinery and shadows. Curtis moved through it like smoke, his footsteps silent on concrete floors. He'd learned to walk without sound in places far more dangerous than this, stalking enemies who would have killed him instantly if detected. Voices drifted down from above, 2 men arguing in low tones. Telling you, we should have moved him already. Too risky keeping him this long. Glenn said wait until after the exchange. Don't be stupid, Melvin. Melvin, Glenn's brother. That confirmed 2 hostiles at least. Curtis found a stairwell and began climbing, testing each step before committing his weight. On the 3rd floor, he could see light bleeding from under a door, probably a former office, now repurposed as a holding cell. He keyed his radio, barely whispering. 4 hostiles confirmed. 3rd floor. Moving to verify the package. Rivas's voice crackled back. Copy. Standing by. Curtis approached the door, his movements careful and controlled. Through a gap in the doorframe, he could see the interior, a room lit by camping lanterns for men playing cards at a makeshift table. And in the corner, wrists zip-tied to a metal pipe, was Joel Morris. The boy looked exhausted but unharmed. His eyes were red from crying, but he was alive. Relief flooded through Curtis, followed immediately by cold calculation. 4 armed hostiles, 1 12-year-old civilian, and Curtis with just a knife in his hands. Even odds. But rescuing Joel right now would be a mistake. Curtis needed Glenn Madden, needed to know why this was happening and ensure it never happened again. Grabbing Joel and running wouldn't solve anything. Glenn would disappear, regroup, and try again with another family. No, Curtis needed to finish this properly. He backed away from the door, descending to the 2nd floor, and keyed his radio. Package confirmed. For hostiles. I need you to call it in, but not yet. In 30 minutes, I want every cop in the city rolling up to this location, sirens blazing. What? Curtis, if we wait. Trust me, Glenn isn't here. These are his crew, his brother Melvin included. We take them down, but Glenn escapes, and this never ends. I need Glenn to come to me. Ow! You're about to find out. Curtis moved back to the first floor, positioning himself near the main entrance. Then he pulled out Lorena's burner phone and dialed Glenn Madden's number. The man answered on the third ring, voice sharp with suspicion. Lorena? Why are you calling this number? Because, Curtis said in his own voice, Lorena isn't your problem anymore. I am. A beat of silence. Who the hell? My name is Curtis Farley. I'm the chauffeur you try to play. I'm also former Navy SEAL Team 6, and I've got your brother and 3 of your men sitting in a factory in Henderson City right now, completely unaware that I've been watching them for the past 20 minutes. He could almost hear Glenn's mind racing. You're bluffing. Third floor, northeast corner. Melvin's wearing a Detroit Tigers cap. The guy next to him has a scar on his right forearm. Joel's in the corner, zip-tied to a pipe, probably wondering when his father's going to pay you. Want me to keep going? If you're really there, why haven't you moved in? Because I don't want your crew, Glenn. I want you. I could call them right now. Tell them to kill the kid. You could. But then you lose your $5 million, and I make it my personal mission to hunt you down and end you. Or, Curtis let the word hang. We make a deal. What kind of deal? You and me, face to face. We swap. You give me Joel, I give you a way to walk away from this. No police, no charges, just you disappearing into whatever hole you crawled out of. Why would you do that? Because all I care about is getting that boy home safe. You're just a problem to be solved, and I'm offering you the smart solution. You kill Joel, you become my problem forever. You walk away, we both get what we want. Glenn was quiet, thinking. Curtis could imagine him weighing options. He didn't know Curtis, didn't know if he could be trusted, but the alternative was losing everything. Where? Glenn finally asked. You know the old Crawford Steelworks? 2 miles from where your crew is hiding. Meet me there in 90 minutes. Come alone, bring Joel, and we make this clean. How do I know this isn't a trap? You don't. But think about it, Glenn. If I wanted you caught, I'd have already called the cops. I'm giving you a way out because I'm tired of people like you thinking you can take what isn't yours. I'm tired of families being destroyed. So here's your choice. Meet me and walk away, or watch as every cop in 3 counties descends on your brother while I personally make sure you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Another long silence. Then 90 minutes. Crawford Steelworks. You try anything, and I'll put a bullet in the kid's head before you can blink. Wouldn't expect anything less. Glenn hung up. Curtis immediately radioed Rivas. You get all that? Every word. You're insane. Maybe. Now here's what I need. In 30 minutes, you raid the factory. Take down Melvin and the crew, but make it loud. I want Glenn to hear about it, to know his operation is blown. That'll make him desperate, sloppy. And you think he'll actually show up at the steelworks? I'm counting on it. Glenn's a professional, but he's also arrogant. He thinks he can outmaneuver me because I'm just a chauffeur. He doesn't understand what he's up against. What if he doesn't bring Joel? Then I improvise. Curtis left the factory, moving through shadows toward his truck. The Crawford Steelworks loomed on the outskirts of Henderson City, a massive complex of blast furnaces and conveyor systems that had been dormant for 15 years. It was perfect, isolated, full of cover, and impossible to approach without being seen. He had 90 minutes to prepare, and he intended to use every second. Chapter 5. The Setup. The Crawford Steelworks sprawled across 10 acres of broken concrete and rusted metal, its skeletal structures rising against the night sky like the bones of some long-dead beast. Curtis moved through it with tactical precision, mapping angles, marking positions, setting up the battlefield in his favor. This was what he'd been trained for, not just combat, but control. The environment, the engagement, the enemy's psychology. Glenn Madden was walking into Curtis's world now, and the man didn't even know it. Curtis found the main assembly floor, a vast open space where molten steel had once flowed. Catwalks crisscrossed overhead, and massive machinery created shadows within shadows. He positioned himself on an elevated platform with clear sight lines to all entrances, then checked his equipment. 1 pistol, A Sig Sauer P226 he'd kept from his military days, loaded with hollow points. Illegal for a civilian to carry concealed, but Curtis had stopped caring about legality around the time someone had taken Joel Morris from school. One combat knife, one flashlight, and his most important weapon, his mind. His radio crackled. Rivas's voice came through. We hit the factory. Melvin Madden and 3 others in custody, but Curtis, they're not talking. Lawyered up immediately. Without Glenn, we can't prove they kidnapped Joel. It's just trespassing at worst. Glenn will provide all the proof you need. How'd Melvin react when you grabbed him? Confused as hell. Kept asking how he found them. Good. That means Glenn doesn't know. He'll come. Curtis, if this goes wrong. It won't. Stay clear of the steelworks. If you hear gunfire, wait 10 minutes before entering. I need to control this situation, and I can't do that with badges swarming. You're asking me to let you operate outside the law. I'm asking you to trust that I know what I'm doing. A pause. Then Rivas said quietly, bring that boy home, Curtis, and try not to die. Curtis killed the radio and settled into position, his breathing slowing, his mind clearing. This was the part he'd always been good at, the waiting, the stillness before action. In Afghanistan, he'd spent 48 hours lying in the same position waiting for a target, his body perfectly immobile while his mind stayed sharp. Joel Morris was worth 48 hours and more. At exactly 4:17 a.m., Curtis heard the sound of a vehicle approaching. A black SUV, lights off, navigating through the steelworks' broken parking lot. It stopped near the main entrance, engine still running, ready for a quick escape. Smart. Glenn wasn't taking chances. The driver's door opened, and a figure emerged. Curtis looked through his scope, modified for low-light conditions, and got his first clear look at Glenn Madden. Tall, rangy, moving with the confidence of someone who'd been in combat before. Ex-cop training was evident in how he held himself, how he scanned the environment. The rear door opened. Joel stumbled out, his hands still zip-tied, duct tape across his mouth. Glenn grabbed him by the shoulder, using the boy as a human shield while scanning the darkness. Curtis Farley. Glenn's voice echoed through the empty space. You hear? Curtis activated a remote trigger, a flashlight he'd positioned 40 feet to his left, programmed to flicker on. Glenn's attention snapped toward it, his weapon coming up. In that moment of distraction, Curtis moved. Not toward Glenn, but laterally, repositioning to a catwalk that gave him a better angle. Glenn might be ex-cop, but Curtis was ex-SEAL, and there were levels to this game. I'm here, Curtis called out, his voice coming from the new position. Let the boy go, Glenn. You've lost. Your crew is in custody, your operation is blown, and you're standing in the middle of nowhere with no backup. It's over. Maybe. Glenn jerked Joel closer. But I've still got the kid. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let me walk out of here. In 2 hours, I'll call and tell you where to find him. You have my word. Your word. Curtis let contempt drip into his voice. You kidnapped a 12-year-old, threatened to cut off his fingers, and terrorized a family. Your word is worthless. Then we've got a problem, because I'm not leaving without leverage. Curtis had expected this. Glenn was desperate now, backed into a corner, and desperate men made predictable mistakes. Let me ask you something. Why Joel? Why the Morris family? You've pulled kidnappings before, but this one feels personal. What am I missing? You think I'm going to monologue like some movie villain? I think you're stalling for time, trying to figure out your play. But here's the thing, Glenn, you don't have a play. Every exit is covered. Every option leads to a cage. So yeah, I think you're going to monologue because talking is the only thing keeping you alive right now. A tense silence stretched between them. Then Glenn laughed, harsh and bitter. You want to know why? Fine. 7 years ago, Walter Morris's company bought out my security firm, promised to keep us on, said we'd be contractors for Morris Tech. You know what happened instead? He gutted us, took our clients, and left me with nothing. My business, my reputation, everything gone because that bastard wanted to eliminate competition. So this is revenge. This is justice. Morris destroyed my life. I'm just returning the favor. Glenn's grip tightened on Joel. And if I can't have my payday, at least I'll make him suffer. Curtis saw it then, the shift in Glenn's posture, the way his finger moved toward the trigger. The man had made his decision. If he couldn't win, he'd burn everything down. "Joel!" Curtis shouted. "Drop!" The boy, terrified but trusting, went limp. Glenn's grip faltered for half a second as Joel's dead weight pulled him off balance. In that half second, Curtis moved. He fired twice, not at Glenn, but at the concrete beside him, the rounds sparking and ricocheting with spectacular effect. Glenn flinched, his weapon swinging away from Joel, and Curtis was already moving, dropping from the catwalk, closing the 20-foot distance in seconds. Glenn fired. The shot went wide. He'd been aiming blind, panicked, and then Curtis was on him. The next 10 seconds were brutal efficiency. Curtis struck Glenn's wrist with his knife pommel, forcing him to drop the gun. An elbow to the solar plexus doubled Glenn over. A sweep took his legs out, and when Glenn hit the ground, Curtis's knife was at his throat. "Game over," Curtis said quietly. Glenn stared up at him, rage and fear mixing in his eyes. "You're going to kill me." "That depends on you." Curtis applied just enough pressure for Glenn to feel the blade's edge. "Here's what happens next. You tell me everything. Who else was involved, where the planning happened, how you recruited Lorena. You give me every detail, and I make sure that he knows you cooperated. And if I don't," Curtis leaned closer, "then I let you go." Glenn blinked, confused. "What?" "I'll let you walk out of here. No charges, no cops, nothing. And tomorrow, maybe a week from now, maybe a month, you'll wake up and I'll be there. And what I do to you will make federal prison look like paradise. Your choice." The color drained from Glenn's face. He was ex-cop. He knew what federal charges for kidnapping meant. But he also saw something in Curtis's eyes that told him the second option was infinitely worse. "I'll talk," Glenn whispered. "I'll tell you everything." Curtis pulled Glenn to his feet and pushed him against a support beam, using zip ties to secure his hands. Then he moved to Joel, cutting the boy's restraints and pulling the tape gently from his mouth. "Curtis." Joel's voice was small, broken. "I've got you, kid. You're safe now." Joel collapsed against him, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. Curtis held him, feeling the boy's shoulders shake, and thought about all the missions that had gone wrong, all the people he hadn't been able to save. Not this time. This time, he'd succeeded. His radio crackled. "Curtis? We heard shots. Status. Code 4. Package secure. One hostile in custody. You can come in now." As sirens began wailing in the distance, Curtis kept holding Joel, letting the boy cry it out. And for the first time in 3 years, since Kandahar, since losing his team, Curtis Farley felt like maybe, just maybe, he could forgive himself. Chapter 6. Unraveling Threads. The police station hummed with controlled chaos. Curtis sat in Detective Rivas's office, a cup of terrible coffee growing cold in his hands, while Joel was with his parents in a private room down the hall. Through the glass partition, Curtis could see Catherine clutching her son, Walter's hand on the boy's shoulder, the family reunited and whole. It should have felt like victory, but something nagged at Curtis, an itch between his shoulder blades that usually meant he was missing something important. Rivas entered carrying a file folder. "Glenn's singing like a canary. Gave us everything. The planning, the surveillance, how he recruited Lorena. It's a solid case. He's looking at 20 years minimum. His story check out? About Morris destroying his security company. Yeah, actually, 7 years ago, Morris Tech did acquire Madden Security Solutions in a hostile takeover. Glenn's not wrong about being pushed out." Rivas sat heavily. "Doesn't justify kidnapping, but it explains the motivation." Curtis stared at his coffee, thinking, 7 years is a long time to wait for revenge. Maybe he needed time to plan it properly. Or maybe something else triggered him now. Curtis pulled out his phone, scrolling through the information Marcus had sent. "Glenn's financial records. Did your people pull them?" "Working on it." "What?" "Because professional kidnappers don't usually work alone, and they don't usually wait 7 years to act. Glenn had help, and not just Melvin and those 3 guys we grabbed. This was too smooth, too well-coordinated." Rivas frowned. "You think there's someone else?" Before Curtis could answer, his phone buzzed. "Marcus Webb. That name you gave me, Lorena Maldonado. She's got a sister in Mexico, Marissa Maldonado. Guess where Marissa worked 2 years ago? Curtis felt ice slide down his spine. Where? Morris Tech Accounting Department. Fired 6 months ago for accessing confidential files. Want to guess whose files? Curtis stood abruptly. Where's Lorena? In holding. Why? Because we need to ask her about her sister. Now, they found Lorena in an interview room, looking small and exhausted. When Curtis and Rivas entered, she looked up with red-rimmed eyes. I already told you everything. Tell me about Marissa, Curtis said, his voice gentle but firm. Lorena's expression flickered, surprise, then fear. How do you know about? She worked for Morris Tech. She was fired. And somehow, Glenn Madden knew exactly when to grab Joel, exactly how the family security worked, exactly who to threaten. That information had to come from somewhere. Tears spilled down Lorena's cheeks. She said it was just money. Glenn promised her a cut if she helped with information. Marissa was angry about being fired, about the way Mr. Morris treated her. She wanted revenge too. Where is she now? I don't know. She went back to Guadalajara 2 weeks ago. I thought she was out of it. Curtis and Rivas exchanged glances. You thought wrong, Rivas said. If Marissa helped plan this, she's an accessory to kidnapping. But Curtis was already thinking 3 steps ahead. If Marissa was in Mexico, she was beyond easy reach. They could request extradition, but that took time, resources, and cooperation from Mexican authorities. Glenn would go down, certainly, but Marissa might slip away. Unless. We need to check Morris Tech's systems, Curtis said suddenly. If Marissa accessed confidential files, she might have left a backdoor. And if Glenn was smart, which we know he is, he might have insurance. Insurance against what? Against getting caught. Think about it. Glenn's operation falls apart. He's looking at serious time. But if he has leverage, something that could hurt Walter Morris, he might try to negotiate a lighter sentence. Rivas's eyes widened. What kind of leverage? The kind Marissa could have stolen. Financial records, proprietary information, maybe even evidence of wrongdoing. Walter Morris is a billionaire. You don't get that rich without making enemies and bending some rules. They drove to Morris Tech headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the city's financial district. Even at 7 a.m., the building was already buzzing with activity. Walter met them in the lobby, still wearing yesterday's clothes, looking haggard but relieved. Curtis, detective. Joel's home, resting. I can't thank you enough. Mr. Morris, we need access to your company's servers. Specifically, we need to see what files Marissa Maldonado accessed before she was fired. Walter's expression darkened. Marissa, I should have known she was involved. That woman was trouble from day one. What did she do to get fired? We caught her trying to access encrypted files, financial projections, merger documents, things well above her clearance level. I had security escort her out immediately. Did she succeed? In accessing the files. Our IT team said she'd hit the encryption. They didn't think she got through. Walter paused. But you think she did? I think she was smarter than your IT team realized. And I think whatever she found might be what Glenn's using as backup insurance. In the server room, surrounded by humming machines and blinking lights, Curtis and Morris Tech's head of IT, a nervous man named Oliver, reviewed access logs from 6 months ago. Here, Oliver said, pointing at his screen. Marissa Maldonado logged in on March 15th at 11:47 p.m. That's way outside her normal hours. She accessed, oh God. What? Curtis leaned in. Project Titan. It's Mr. Morris. She got into Project Titan. Walter went pale. That's impossible. Those files are triple encrypted. What's Project Titan? Rivas asked. Walter sat heavily. A merger we've been planning with a Japanese tech firm. Worth billions, completely confidential. If that information leaked, your competitors would know your strategy, Curtis finished. They could undercut you, sabotage the deal, cost you everything. But why would Glenn care about that? He just wanted revenge. Curtis shook his head slowly. No, he wanted money. The revenge was just his motivation. But Marissa, she saw an opportunity. Steal the information, give it to Glenn, and he uses it to blackmail you. $5 million wasn't a ransom. It was a down payment. After that, Glenn would have bled you dry to keep Project Titan secret. Jesus. Walter's hands were shaking. So what do? We find Marissa and shut this down before she can sell the information. Curtis turned to Oliver. Can you trace where she sent the files? Maybe, if she used an external drive or uploaded them somewhere. Oliver typed frantically, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Got something. March 16th, 2:14 a.m. Large data transfer to an encrypted cloud storage account. The account was created 3 weeks before her first access attempt. Can you break the encryption? Not without the password. And this is military-grade encryption. It could take months. Curtis thought for a moment, then pulled out his phone and called Marcus. I need a favor. Big one. Name it. I need you to access a cloud storage account. Encrypted. Can you do it? How hot is this account? Kidnapping, corporate espionage, possible international implications. A whistle. You're asking me to commit a felony. I'm asking you to stop a woman from selling secrets that could cost thousands of people their jobs and destroy a multi-billion-dollar merger. You in? A pause. Then, send me the details. Curtis gave Marcus the account information, then hung up and turned to Walter. We wait. If Marcus can crack it, we'll know what Marissa has and where she's planning to sell it. And if he can't, then we find another way. I didn't bring your son home just to let someone else destroy your family. They returned to the police station. Glenn was still in interrogation, his lawyer present, but when Curtis entered the room, the lawyer looked nervous. My client has cooperated fully. He's provided valuable information. Your client is going to cooperate a lot more, Curtis said, sitting across from Glenn. Tell me about Marissa Maldonado. Glenn's expression shuddered. Don't know what you're talking about. You're a smart guy, Glenn. Smart enough to know that kidnapping a billionaire's son takes resources, planning, and information. Lorena gave you the family schedule, but Marissa gave you something better, leverage. Project Titan. Want to tell me how much you were planning to sell it for? Glenn's lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. Glenn listened, then shook his head. I want a deal. Full immunity for testifying against Marissa. Not happening, Rivas said. But we can talk about reduced charges if you give us everything. Marissa approached me a year ago. Said she had information worth millions, but she needed help getting the money. We planned it together, grabbed the kid, ransom him, but also threatened to leak the Morris Tech information unless Walter paid extra. It was supposed to be foolproof. Where's Marissa now? Guadalajara. She's got the files on an encrypted drive. She's planning to sell them to Sakura Industries. They're Morris Tech's main competitor for the Japanese merger. Curtis's phone buzzed. Marcus, I'm in. Downloading files now. This is nasty stuff, Curtis. If it leaks, Morris is finished. Can you secure it? Make sure Marissa can't access it anymore. Already done. Changed all the passwords. Locked her out. But if she's got a physical copy, leave that to me. Curtis looked at Glenn. Give me Marissa's address in Guadalajara. Every detail you have. You can't touch her there. Mexico won't. I'm not asking what Mexico will do. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. Give me the address, or I walk out of here and let Marissa sell those files. When that happens, Walter Morris loses everything, and you lose your leverage for a deal. Glenn's lawyers started to protest, but Glenn cut him off. Sierra Madre District. Blue House, 3 blocks from a cathedral. She's staying with her aunt. Curtis stood. Detective, I need 48 hours. For what? To finish this properly. Rivas studied him. Curtis, if you're planning what I think you're planning, then you didn't hear it from me. Curtis walked out of the police station into the morning sun. He had a flight to book, equipment to gather, and a woman to convince that stealing from powerful people had consequences. Joel Morris was safe. Glenn was in custody. But Marissa Maldonado was still out there with information that could destroy everything Curtis had fought to protect. Not for long. Chapter 7, Borderline. The flight from Henderson City to Guadalajara took 4 hours. Curtis spent it reviewing everything Marcus had sent about Marissa Maldonado, 32 years old, accounting degree from UCLA, 5 years at Morris Tech before her termination. Smart, ambitious, and according to her personnel file, difficult to work with. What the file didn't say, she was desperate enough to partner with a kidnapper. Curtis landed at Miguel Hidalgo, Costi International Airport at 2:17 p.m., carrying nothing but a small backpack and a phone with an encrypted messaging app. Officially, he was just another tourist. Unofficially, he was operating in a foreign country without backup, authority, or legal protection. Just another Tuesday. He caught a taxi to the Sierra Madre district, a neighborhood of colorful houses and narrow streets that climbed the hills outside the city center. The blue house Glenn had described sat 3 blocks from a small cathedral, its walls weathered but well-maintained, flowers blooming in window boxes. Curtis found a cafe across the street and ordered coffee he didn't drink, watching the house. At 4:30 p.m., a woman emerged, late 20s, dark hair, moving with nervous energy. She checked her phone twice, looked around like she expected surveillance, then headed down the street toward the market. Curtis followed. Tailing someone required patience and skill. Stay too close and they'll spot you. Stay too far and you'll lose them. Curtis kept 3 other people between himself and Marissa at all times, using reflections in shop windows to track her without direct line of sight. She stopped at a small electronics shop, went inside, and emerged 20 minutes later with a package. Then she bought groceries, enough for several days, and returned to the blue house. Curtis circled the block, noting exits, checking for security cameras, mapping the terrain. The house backed onto an alley with a high wall. One entrance easily watched. No visible cameras, no security system. Amateurs. He waited until dark, then scaled the wall and dropped into the backyard. The house was 2 stories, with a light on in an upper window. Curtis could hear voices, Marissa and an older woman, probably her aunt, discussing dinner. The back door was locked, but not bolted. Curtis had it open in 30 seconds, moving silently into a kitchen that smelled of cooking spices and old wood. He ghosted through the lower floor, checking rooms, ensuring no surprises. Marissa's room was on the 2nd floor. Curtis found it empty. She was still downstairs with her aunt, and quickly searched it. Laptop on the desk, encrypted hard drive connected to it. The package from the electronics shop sat unopened nearby. Curtis photographed everything, then settled into the closet to wait. 40 minutes later, footsteps on the stairs. Marissa entered, closed the door, and immediately went to her laptop. Curtis watched through a gap in the closet door as she opened the encrypted files, the same ones Marcus had secured, and began transferring them to a new drive. Time to move. Curtis stepped out of the closet. Hello, Marissa. She spun, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Curtis raised a finger to his lips. Scream, and I disappear. You never see me again, but neither do those files. Your choice. Who are you? Curtis Farley. I work for the Morris family. The same family you helped terrorize. Her face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Glenn Madden. Joel Morris. Project Titan. You gave Glenn everything he needed to kidnap a 12-year-old boy. And now you're planning to sell corporate secrets to Sakura Industries. Curtis moved closer. Want to know how I know? Because I've spent the last 2 days cleaning up the mess you made. You can't prove anything. I'm in Mexico. You have no authority. I don't need authority. I need 5 minutes of your time. Sit. Something in his voice made her obey. Curtis pulled up a chair, keeping himself between her and the door. Here's the situation, he said quietly. Glenn is in custody. He gave you up in exchange for a lighter sentence. The FBI is building a case for corporate espionage, and Mexican authorities have been notified. You're looking at extradition and federal charges. They can't extradite me for working with a kidnapper? Yes, they can. For stealing trade secrets with intent to sell internationally? Absolutely they can. You're not in some safe haven, Marissa. You're in a temporary holding pattern, and that pattern is about to collapse. She was shaking now. What do you want? The drive. All copies of the Project Titan files. And your testimony against Glenn, confirming he approached you, confirming the whole conspiracy. And if I refuse? Curtis leaned back. Then I walk away. You try to sell the information to Sakura, but you discover the files are corrupted. My people made sure of that. Sakura gets angry that you wasted their time. Glenn, try to save himself, gives the FBI evidence that you were the mastermind. And Walter Morris, a very wealthy man with very good lawyers, makes it his personal mission to ensure you spend the next 20 years in a federal prison. That's not fair. Fair. Curtis's voice went cold. You helped kidnap a child. You traumatized a family. You did this for money, and now you want to talk about fair? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Morris Tech destroyed my career. Walter fired me for trying to expose his secrets. You were trying to steal classified information. That's not whistleblowing. That's corporate espionage. And nothing justifies what you did. Marissa was sobbing now, her hands covering her face. Curtis waited, letting the reality sink in. Finally, she looked up. If I cooperate, what happens? You give me the drive, testify against Glenn, and the FBI considers it in your sentencing. You'll still face charges, but cooperation counts for something. How do I know you won't just take the drive and leave me with nothing? Because, Curtis said, unlike you, I keep my word. He extended his hand. After a long moment, Marissa reached for the encrypted drive and placed it in his palm. All copies. Curtis asked. That's the only one. The cloud storage was my backup. And the laptop. She opened it, navigating to the files, and deleted them while Curtis watched. Then she pulled the hard drive from the laptop, handed it to Curtis, and seemed to deflate. What happens now? Now I call Detective Rivas. He contacts Mexican authorities. You'll be held here pending extradition. You cooperate fully, testify honestly, and hope the judge believes in redemption. Curtis pulled out his phone and made the call. While Rivas coordinated with international agencies, Curtis sat with Marissa in silence. Outside, the sounds of the neighborhood drifted through the window. Children playing, music, normal life continuing while hers fell apart. Why'd you really do it? Curtis asked finally. Because I was angry. Because Walter Morris treated me like I was nothing. I worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed everything, and he fired me over a technicality. She wiped her eyes. I wanted him to feel what I felt. Powerless. Afraid. You know what I think? I think you're not a bad person who did a bad thing. I think you're a hurt person who made terrible choices. But that doesn't erase the consequences. You lost people, she said suddenly, looking at him. I can see it in your eyes. Someone you cared about. Curtis was quiet for a moment. My entire team. 6 men who trusted me to bring them home. I failed them, and I've spent every day since trying to make up for it. Is that what this is? Your redemption? Maybe. Or maybe it's just me trying to stop people from making the same mistakes I did. He stood as sirens began wailing in the distance. Those choices you made, they cost Joel Morris his sense of safety. They cost the Morris family their peace. And they cost you your freedom. Was it worth it? Marissa didn't answer. She didn't need to. Mexican police arrived 20 minutes later, professional and efficient. Curtis handed over the drive and the evidence, gave his statement, and watched as they led Marissa away in handcuffs. She looked back once, her expression a mixture of regret and resignation. Curtis caught the last flight back to Henderson City, arriving near midnight. He drove straight to the Morris estate, where lights still burned in the windows. Walter answered the door himself. Curtis, did you? Curtis handed him the encrypted drive. Project Titan is secure. Marissa's in custody. Glenn will testify to the conspiracy. It's over. Walter took the drive with shaking hands. You went to Mexico. You risked. It was necessary. I don't know how to thank you. Name your price. No price, Mr. Morris. Just do me one favor. Treat your employees better. Not everyone who's angry at you will go to Marissa's extremes, but you created an environment where she felt justified. Fix that. Walter nodded slowly. I will. I promise. Inside, Catherine and Joel were in the living room. Joel looked up when Curtis entered, his face breaking into a smile. Curtis, Dad said you got the bad lady. We got her. You're safe now, Joel. Completely safe. The boy hugged him, and Curtis let himself relax for the first time in 3 days. Catherine was crying again, but these were tears of relief. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for bringing our boy home. Curtis stayed for tea, letting the family decompress, answering Joel's 100 questions about Mexico and police work and whether the bad guys would stay in jail. Finally, near 2 a.m., He excused himself and returned to his apartment above the garage. The photo of his SEAL team sat on the shelf, 7 faces frozen in time. Curtis picked it up, studying each man's expression. "We did it," he said quietly. "Brought them all home safe." For the first time in 3 years, the ghost felt a little lighter. Chapter 8. Settling Scores. 3 weeks later, Curtis stood in a federal courthouse, watching as Glenn Madden was led into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit. The man looked diminished somehow, all his arrogance stripped away by the reality of his situation. The trial had been swift. With Marissa's testimony, Lorena's cooperation, and the physical evidence Curtis had gathered, the prosecution's case was airtight. Glenn's lawyer had tried to argue diminished capacity, had pointed to Walter Morris's business practices as provocation, had attempted every legal maneuver possible. Nothing worked. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Dorothy Hammond, listened to everything with impassive patience. Then she read the verdict: guilty on all counts: kidnapping, conspiracy, extortion, and attempted blackmail. Glenn's face remained blank, but Curtis saw his hands clench. "Mr. Madden," Judge Hammond continued, "you targeted a child. You terrorized a family. You attempted to destroy a man's livelihood for personal gain. The law provides certain punishments for these crimes, and I intend to apply them to their fullest extent." She sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for 15. In the gallery, Curtis saw Catherine Morris reach for Walter's hand. Joel sat between them, looking smaller than usual in his court clothes. As Glenn was led away, he looked back at Curtis. Their eyes met, and Curtis saw something there. Not remorse, but acknowledgement. Glenn had gambled and lost, and he understood that Curtis had outplayed him at every turn. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the Morris family. Walter made a brief statement about justice being served and thanked law enforcement. He didn't mention Curtis by name, which was exactly how Curtis wanted it. Detective Rivas found Curtis near his truck. Hell of a thing. Glenn's going away for most of his adult life. He earned it. You know, technically, half of what you did was illegal. The wire trace, going into Mexico, the whole operation. "Are you arresting me, detective?" Rivas smiled. "No, but I'm saying that you walk a dangerous line. One of these days, you're going to step over it, and I won't be able to look the other way. Then I'll make sure I don't get caught." They shook hands, and Curtis drove back to the Morris estate. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of depositions and testimonies, but things were finally settling into a new normal. Joel had started seeing a therapist, working through the trauma. Catherine had thrown herself into charity work. Walter had kept his promise, implementing new HR policies and actually listening to his employees. And Curtis was still the chauffeur, still drove Joel to school, still ran errands, still lived above the garage. But something had changed. The ghost that had haunted him for 3 years had finally started to fade. That evening, Curtis was cleaning the Mercedes when Joel appeared, basketball under his arm. "Want to shoot hoops?" Curtis smiled. "Sure, kid." They played in the driveway as the sun set, Joel chattering about school and friends, and a girl he liked who didn't know he existed. Normal 12-year-old problems. The kind of problems he should be having. "Curtis," Joel asked during a water break, "can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "When those men had me, I kept thinking about what you told me, about how not every mission has a happy ending. And I thought," he paused, struggling with the words, "I thought maybe you wouldn't be able to save me, that this would be your sad mission." Curtis knelt down to Joel's level. "You know what I learned? Every mission is hard. Every single one. But the missions that matter most are the ones where you don't give up, no matter how bad it looks. I didn't save you because I'm some kind of hero. I saved you because giving up wasn't an option. So you'll always be there? If something bad happens again, I'll always be there. You have my word." Joel hugged him quickly, then pulled back, embarrassed. "Cool. So, want to teach me how to throw a knife?" "Absolutely not." "Oh man." That night, Curtis sat in his apartment with a beer and his laptop, reviewing the final reports from Detective Rivas. Glenn Madden was in federal prison. Melvin Madden and his crew had taken plea deals, 5 to 10 years each. Marissa would be extradited in 6 months, facing her own trial. Lorena had been sentenced to 2 years probation and community service. The judge had been lenient given her cooperation and the circumstances with her sister's medical bills. Everything wrapped up neatly. Justice served. The good guys won. So why did Curtis still feel like something was unfinished? His phone rang. Marcus Webb, you watching the news? Marcus asked without preamble. No, why? Walter Morris just announced a major donation to veteran organizations. $20 million, establishing a foundation for SEAL families who lost people in combat. He's calling it the Eric Vance Memorial Fund. Curtis felt his throat tighten. He what? Yeah. Press release says it was inspired by a chauffeur's service and sacrifice. You told him about your team? I mentioned Eric once. I didn't think. Curtis stopped, emotions he'd kept locked away for 3 years suddenly threatening to overwhelm him. 20 million? And that's just the initial donation. Morris is pledging to match contributions. Curtis, this is going to help a lot of families. After he hung up, Curtis sat in the darkness of his apartment, thinking about Eric and the rest of his team. Thinking about the mission that had gone wrong, about all the ways he'd blamed himself for their deaths. Maybe he couldn't bring them back. Maybe he couldn't erase his failures. But maybe, just maybe, he could honor their memory by helping others avoid the same fate. He picked up the photo of his team, studying each face. This one's for you guys, he whispered. His phone buzzed again. A text from Walter. Can we talk tomorrow? Have a proposition for you. Curtis typed back, of course. Everything okay? Better than okay. I'll explain tomorrow. Curtis set down the phone and finished his beer, watching the lights of the city in the distance. Whatever Walter wanted to discuss, whatever came next, Curtis knew one thing for certain. He was ready. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. Walter Morris's study smelled of leather and old books, the kind of room designed to impress and intimidate. Curtis sat in a chair that probably cost more than his truck, waiting while Walter poured 2 glasses of scotch. 20-year-old McAllen, Walter said, handing Curtis a glass. Celebration is in order. For what? For you. For everything you did for my family. Walter sat across from him. Curtis, I've been thinking about what you said, about treating my employees better, about creating an environment where people like Marissa don't feel justified in their anger. You were right. I built this company by being ruthless, by putting profits over people. That ends now. That's good to hear, sir. But I need help. I need someone who understands loyalty, sacrifice, and doing the right thing even when it's hard. Someone who proved they'd walk through fire for this family. Walter leaned forward. I want you to head a new division, more security. Not just drivers and guards, but comprehensive security consulting. Personal protection, corporate security, crisis management. You'd have full authority, handpick your team, design the protocols. Curtis stared at him. Sir, I'm just a chauffeur. You're a decorated Navy SEAL who single-handedly rescued my son from armed kidnappers, tracked down co-conspirators across international borders, and prevented a corporate espionage disaster. You're exactly what this company needs. I don't know anything about running a division. You know about leadership. You know about protecting people. The business side, we can teach you. But what you have, that integrity, that dedication, that can't be taught. Walter slid a folder across the desk. Starting salary, benefits package, and full authority to build your team however you see fit. Think about it. Curtis opened the folder, his eyes widening at the numbers. It was more money than he'd ever imagined making, more security than he'd dared hope for. Why, he asked. Why trust me with this? Because 3 weeks ago, you wired $100 to a kidnapper's account and told me you'd bring my son home or die trying. You kept that promise. That's the kind of person I want leading security for my company. Walter raised his glass. What do you say? Curtis thought about his apartment above the garage, about 3 years of driving in silence, about ghosts that had finally started to rest. He thought about Eric and the team, about second chances and redemption. I say yes. They clinked glasses, and Curtis allowed himself a small smile. This was new territory, uncharted waters, but he'd faced worse odds with less support. When do I start? Immediately. Your first task is hiring. I want the best, former military, law enforcement, people with real-world experience. And Curtis, Walter's expression grew serious. I want you to find people like you. People who need a second chance, who've made mistakes but want to do better. Give them what you never had, a chance to prove themselves again. Over the next 6 weeks, Curtis transformed. The apartment above the garage became his office, while a dedicated floor in Morris Tower was renovated for the new security division. He reached out to old contacts, former teammates who'd struggled with civilian life, cops who'd grown disillusioned with bureaucracy, specialists who'd been told they were too old or too damaged for traditional work. He found 12 people, men and women, who shared his dedication and understood that protecting others wasn't just a job, it was a calling. His second in command was a former Marine named Herbert McLean, 47, who'd lost his leg in Iraq and spent 5 years believing he was useless. Curtis put him in charge of tactical training and watched the man come alive again. For technology and cybersecurity, he hired Stella Wiley, an ex-FBI analyst who'd quit after watching too many cases collapse on technicalities. She built a system that made Glenn Madden's operation look like amateur hour. And for personal protection, the close quarters work that required split-second decisions and absolute trust, Curtis recruited Kelly Bridges, a former Secret Service agent who'd left after a mental breakdown. She was the best Curtis had ever seen, and under his leadership, she rediscovered her confidence. 3 months after Glenn Madden's sentencing, Morris Security officially launched. They took their first client, a tech startup whose CEO had received death threats, and handled it so professionally that referrals started pouring in. Curtis found himself doing what he'd always been meant to do, protecting people, leading a team, making a difference. The nightmares about Afghanistan didn't disappear, but they came less frequently. The guilt didn't vanish, but it transformed into something else, motivation. One Saturday afternoon, Curtis drove to the cemetery where Eric Vance was buried. He hadn't been here since the funeral 3 years ago, hadn't been able to face the stone with Eric's name etched in marble. Now he knelt beside the grave, brushing away leaves. "Hey, brother, I know it's been a while." Curtis paused, gathering his thoughts. "I wanted to tell you, I'm doing okay. Better than okay. Actually, found a purpose again, a reason to get up every morning. Remember how you always said I was too hard on myself? Said I needed to learn to forgive and move forward? Well, I'm trying." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass. "There's a fund now, in your name, helping families of fallen SEALs. It's going to do real good, Eric. And I'm leading a security team, handpicked, all people who needed second chances like me. We're making a difference, keeping people safe. It's what we always wanted to do, right? Save lives, protect the innocent, all that hero bullshit." Curtis smiled despite the tears on his face. "I miss you, miss all of you, but I'm not letting your death define me anymore. I'm letting your lives inspire me. That's what you'd want, isn't it?" He placed a hand on the gravestone, said a quiet prayer, and stood. As he walked back to his truck, not the beat-up Ford anymore, but a new vehicle courtesy of his salary, his phone rang. "Walter Morris." "Curtis, we have a situation. Tech CEO in San Francisco. Stalker escalating to physical threats. Client is scared. Police are useless. Think you can handle it?" Curtis climbed into the truck, already running through protocols and personnel assignments. "I'm on it. Give me 2 hours." He hung up and started the engine. But before pulling away, he looked back at Eric's grave one more time. "Wish me luck, brother. I've got work to do." 6 months later, Curtis stood in the Morris family living room, watching Joel blow out candles on his 13th birthday cake. The kid had shot up 3 inches, his voice was cracking, and he'd finally gotten the courage to ask out the girl he liked. Growing up, moving forward, healing. The whole Morris family was healing. Catherine had started a foundation for kidnapping victims' families. Walter had transformed Morris Tech's culture, earning recognition as one of the best companies to work for. And Joel was just a normal teenager now, the trauma of his kidnapping fading into a story he told with more pride than fear. "Make a wish," Catherine called out. Joel closed his eyes, thought for a moment, then blew. Everyone cheered, and as the cake was served, Joel pulled Curtis aside. "Can I tell you what I wish for? Aren't wishes supposed to be secret? This one's different." Joel looked up at him seriously. I wish that you'd always be part of our family. Not just the guy who works for us, but like, I don't know, like a real uncle or something. Someone who's always there. Curtis felt his chest tighten. Joel, I know you can't promise that. You've got your own life, your own stuff. But I wanted you to know that's what I wish for. That you'd stay. Curtis put a hand on the boy's shoulder. I'm not going anywhere, kid. I promise. Later that night, after the party, Curtis returned to his new apartment. A proper place downtown, close to Morris Tower, decorated with photos of his team and the new life he was building. He sat on the couch with a beer, reviewing personnel files for the next hire, when his phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Webb. Heard Morris Security is expanding. Need any CIA washouts? Curtis smiled and typed back, depends. You finally ready to do something meaningful with your life? Been ready for years. Just needed the right person to follow. Come to Henderson City. We'll talk. Curtis set down the phone and looked around his apartment, at the photos of his old SEAL team beside pictures of his new security team, at the Eric Vance Memorial Fund plaque Walter had given him, at the letter from Kelly Bridges thanking him for believing in her when nobody else would. This was what redemption looked like. Not a single moment of glory, but 1,000 small choices to be better, to do better, to honor the fallen by protecting the living. His phone buzzed again. Detective Rivas, got a weird case. Could use more security's expertise. You available? Curtis looked at his beer, at the quiet apartment, at the peaceful Saturday night he'd been planning. Then he set down the beer and grabbed his jacket. Always available, he said to himself. Some people were born to protect others. Curtis Farley had spent 3 years running from that truth. 3 years believing he'd failed his calling. But he understood now. He hadn't failed. He'd just been preparing for the next mission. And the mission never ended. As he drove toward the police station, the city lights reflecting off his windshield, Curtis thought about everything that had led to this moment. The pain, the loss, the guilt, the rescue, the redemption, the rebuild. It had all been worth it. Every mission was hard. Every mission required sacrifice. But some missions, the ones that really mattered, they changed you. They broke you down and built you back up stronger, wiser, more human. Curtis Farley had been broken in Afghanistan. He'd been reshaped in Henderson City. And now, finally, he was whole. His phone rang. He answered, Curtis Farley, Morris Security. Curtis, it's Rivas. We need you downtown. It's urgent. On my way. He pressed the accelerator, the city rushing past. Another emergency, another chance to make a difference. The ghosts of his past rode with him. Eric and the team, always present, always watching, but they weren't haunting him anymore. They were guiding him, and Curtis was finally ready to follow where they led. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.